Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Aspect Reacts here on the Aspect Network. I'm one of your hosts, Sean Hussey, and joining me every week to discuss the newest episode of The Penguin is Alex Batts. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk about this week's episode. They're 5 for 5, man. They just
Yeah.
keep on rolling. So we'll kick off
Spoiler
this
alert,
episode.
it's good.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pretty good show. So we'll kick off this episode by discussing our overall thoughts on the fifth episode of The Penguin Homecoming. So, Sean, what did you think about this episode?
Yeah, no, continuing to build off of the momentum and success of the first four episodes, as you said, 5 for 5 so far. I think that this is a really great opportunity for the show to kind of slow down as it approaches kind of its 8 episode mark, right? It builds a lot of momentum to the mid season. And then, I anticipate this week and next week to be a little bit slower as we ramp into the finale. And we're seeing a lot of repercussions and important things are happening. But we're starting to see the opportunity that the writers and the directors and the whole team overall is allowing to let these characters sort of breathe for a minute, start building some relationships, filling in some context, and starting to allow these characters to really like come into their own and develop the arcs that are going to be established for sort of the back half of the season or sort of the whole show, depending on how this run happens. um Continuing to always be impressed by the performances here. We get to spend a lot more time with Oz and Colin Farrell this episode, which I really appreciated. It seems like we're really on the horizon of a flashback episode for him in the next episode, most likely, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Hmm.
Um, but I really like what they were able to set up here. And, obviously there were a lot of dominoes that fell this episode, big repercussions from the midseason finale last week, but also just a lot more things happening that I don't think we were expecting and some twists and turns. So overall, continuing to be really impressed with the show. And, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic. It's really funny that you specifically used the dominoes falling thing because I was going to mention that the first few episodes have really felt like just a rapid series of dominoes falling and like one thing immediately after the other and like kind of going with that. And it's also weird to say and feel like this episode is a bit of a slowdown from the like consistent escalation that we've gotten, even though we still get escalation here, of course, but like the fact that this manages to feel like kind of like taking a beat and slowing down a little bit while we also still get like almost the entire eradication of the Moroni family. We get Sophia really like consolidating her like power as and like renaming
And
the
the
family
eradication of the Falcons.
the Falcons. Yeah, like we get these huge things happening, but the way that the show does it, like in comparison to everything else that we've seen so far, it really does feel like it's kind of like taking a second, as you said, and like letting the characters kind of catch up to the status quo of things, even though that is a status quo that's still like changing and evolving. Um, so it's really impressive that it's able to get to that feeling and also just a testament to like how sort of breakneck the show has felt so far. Like it's wild to think about the fact that last week, which was primarily a flashback episode, still felt like consistent escalation in the
Mhm.
show. Like I don't understand how you do that. Like I know like technically how they did, but it's just that's such a really cool thing to be able to do and to keep that level of momentum going. And then yeah, I think that what you're saying is pretty accurate in the fact that like this week and next week will be a kind of like not that they're like taking a break and nothing's really like moving forward, but very much a like kind of breather in comparison to the first four episodes. And then I imagine that the seventh and eighth episode are going to be pretty wild and like everything just hitting the fan more than it already is.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's going to be really wild to see. It's again, I think like we've been saying every week, I don't really know exactly where like I have no idea where things will end up by the seventh and eighth episode. Like so much of the
It's so
things
funny
where
you
I'm
say that.
really
Well, just in the way I was like, my next point was really going to be like, man, I owe you a big apology because you've been kind of nailing the predictions so far. Just in terms of like, you've been really on the train of like, obviously, you still feel pretty firm about your prediction that Oz is going to end up on
in
top by
charge.
the end of this.
Hmm.
And I was really unsure how that was going to happen or how many dominoes were going to need to fall in order to do that. And every week I just keep seeing the seeds being planted, being like, oh man, I mean, Alex fucking called it. It's a good job.
Yeah, I think I feel
Yeah,
confident about the broad strokes of it. It's just the specifics of getting there where I'm
sure.
like, I don't really know like what exactly is going to click into place for this to happen. Um, but yeah, I do. Yeah, I think that it very much is setting up a realistic path for Oz to be at the top by the end of this. Absolutely. I also do feel I was like half right about the Johnny Vitti thing. She kept him around for a minute. she she was like, "Oh, you're useful, and I like need your help." But then that didn't last, of course. Um,
I think you
but
kinda
yeah,
nailed that prediction too, honestly. I think you were pretty spot on about that one.
yeah,
So kudos to you, kicking all sorts of ass in the prediction territory. Um, yeah, I mean, it continues to build on some really strong elements, and particularly I what I loved about this episode is its breakdown of Oz as a character and the way that we're starting to see some of the cracks in his armor that have certainly existed from the get-go, right? Like one of the things I think we talked about in episode 1 and something that has been a concurrent theme but really has like reared its ugly head again this week, is just his insecurity and like
hmm
how much of that creeps through when like things are being put up against the wall and he's being pushed into a corner.
yeah,
And we've talked about it week over week how I've sort of continued to raise a little bit of an eyebrow and Oz's like believability and his ability to come into power despite also sort of fumbling a lot of things along the way. And I think that just makes him like a relatable character and somebody we can be sympathetic towards, right? Like I
yeah.
am rooting for him even though
Which
he's a
is
bad person.
wild. Yeah, he's
Um,
terrible. But I'm like, oh
right.
yeah, you
Which
like.
like they talked about in the behind the scenes too, but like this episode in particular really is hitting on the idea too of like this is a bad person. But
Yeah,
you've been sitting in the corner rooting in Sophia's corner, so I guess I'm
I'll root.
taking up Oz's, I suppose.
It's terrible because I like will root. They can't both win, obviously, but I'm like, but I like seeing both of them succeed, which is just
And
a
we know which
testament.
one of them's gonna win
I mean, yeah, that's true. If
because
my
his
one
name
prediction's
is
gonna
the
hold,
show.
yeah, if my one prediction's gonna hold true, then it has to be Oz, obviously. But yeah, it's the thing where like it's just a testament to the writing of the show where I can watch scenes with Sophia and her like being able to consolidate her family and take control of that. And I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, you go. This is great for you. Love to see it. And then I also will see Oz, worming and manipulating his way through the different situations and still finding a way out of it. And I'm like, oh yeah, you got this, bro. Like, keep going. You can do it. Like, the sequence of them breaking into the tattoo parlor is just amazing. It's fantastic. Like, just one design and like execution on the whole way. But like, yeah, just seeing Oz in that thing where it's like, okay, like he's figuring out his next moves and really like executing them and then still making things work when they do go awry. And that's just exciting to see and something where I'm like, yeah, you got this, man. Like, you can do it, even though he's just continuing to not necessarily make the smartest decisions.
Yeah, I mean, even his like, speed at which he was trying to like work on executing the Maronis has like obviously backfired in a way
hmm
that now, of course, like Sal is out, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later this episode,
hmm
because that was a good little twist.
Yeah.
Although we did predict he was going to get out at some point.
Yeah, and then
So
we like recanted on that. We were like, I don't know if he really needs like him to get out, and then
yeah,
he does
well,
get
we're
out.
killing it on the predictions front, that's for sure. Um, but yeah, I mean, on the overview side of things too, like we're starting to see some other elements fall into place of like we definitely see a bit of a darker and more deterministic version of Vic this episode.
hmm
Which is, you mentioned the tattoo parlor scene, he is a really key player in that, and then stepping up to the plate to help take care of Oz's mother.
hmm
But that poster came out like a couple episodes ago now of like they've been doing these like shadow posters that they've been doing in the press
hmm
for the show. I don't know if you've seen some of these yet.
I actually don't
You
think I have.
Yeah, these are cool. They're like their versions of character posters, and like in the shadows they're like doing different things, and like Vix is of him holding like a crowbar, and people were like, oh no, like Vic's gonna fuck some people up.
Hell yeah.
um
Love to
and
see
it
it.
just feels like we're continuing to head in that direction. I mean, it feels like, not to get too ahead in speculation, and like I just feel like we're gonna end up talking a lot about Sophia and some other things too, but um I mean, I think Vix can end up like beating the shit out of Squid, and like probably killing Squid by the end of this season. Like it
Oh, for
feels like a
sure.
confrontation between the two of them is going to happen, and that's going to be. sort of his arc into um evil, for lack of a better term. um, is
So
his
it's gonna be his
his
point of no
fall.
return. I mean, he's already
Yeah.
in the, like, point of
That's
no
that's
return
a better
basically,
way to
but,
put it.
like
His point of no return. Thank you.
yeah, he's, like, most of the way there right now. I mean, he ran into people with his car and helped Oz get out, but he hasn't done as much, like, I don't know, directly with his hand. He doesn't have the
Yeah.
blood directly on his hands
Well,
yet,
that
even though
crowbar's coming.
yeah, which also
Jason
great
Todd style.
yeah, great symbolism of the fact that he is introduced stealing the tires off of Oz's car,
Oh, you're
and
so right.
now he's probably gonna end up using a crowbar. So there's we'll get uh, fucking just wait
Those
for
people
everyone to
are
have the
cool,
fan
but that's
theories
good.
about that he's this universe's version of Jason Todd.
No,
It's
it's Victor
terrible.
Freeze, bro.
Yeah, I also remember seeing that like people were saying that because his name is Victor. I'm like, can these people chill, bro? Even though I can't really say anything, I guess, since I was like, oh, Julian Rush is this version of
I mean, he
Calendar
still
Man,
might
maybe.
be. He's around
That's
plenty this
the
episode. We'll talk
yeah,
about
which
that too.
I
Um,
also he walks back in and I was like,
that was
"Hey, I
one of
knew
the
this."
negative. That was one of our negative predictions where we said, "I think this guy might be done."
Well, no, I thought that he might still come back, and you were like, "No, it feels like he's probably done." And I was like, "Yeah, that does sound." I mean, like I could see a world where he doesn't show back up, but he's back.
We'll keep it.
So
We'll keep a tally.
I think
Uh,
he's gonna. I don't know. I still don't trust the light thing. That was too strong of a visual motif thing, and like a use case for that. I don't believe that that's not gonna come
that's a
like
great
factor
point. I
back.
kind of forgot about that.
Like, there's no way that's not gonna factor back into play here at some point.
Yeah. No, that's super true. Any other thoughts, kind of overall?
Not overall, because I think most of mine are more specific of like favorite moments and you know seeing some really interesting things in there.
All right, cool. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we will discuss some of our favorite moments from tonight's episode. We'll be right back.
Hey, Aspect listener, I'm Kate.
And I'm Alex, enjoying this show here on the Aspect Network.
Then check out Bending the Narrative.
We're your one-stop shop for all things Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Each week, we break down an episode from the series and discuss our favorite moments, with a particular focus on the characters and narrative threads that tie the series together.
In addition to discussing the original series, we're also tackling things from The Legend of Korra to the novels and the comics as well.
Now join us as we travel into the world of Team Avatar and discuss one of the greatest animated series of all time on Bending the Narrative here on the Aspect Network.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the show. Before the break, we discussed our overall thoughts on episode 5 of The Penguin Homecoming. Now we want to dive into some of our favorite moments from tonight's episode. Alex, where do you want to start?
All of the stuff with it's funny because I'm forgetting his name now, but the Maroni's son.
Oh,
Oh,
Taj.
yeah, Taj. All that stuff was fantastic. I mentioned it in the first segment, but the like tattoo parlor sequence when he's getting there and Penguin and his goons come in and just start laying people out and then chasing after him. Like I thought that sequence was awesome, but then also the handoff between um him and his mother and the other guy. One, whenever he first comes out of the van and he was like soaking lit, I was like, oh, that's definitely gasoline, and he's definitely just gonna like light a trail of fire to him
I'm
after he
glad
gets
you
over
got
there.
that. 'Cause
Yeah, I
I was
like
a
it.
little, because I was,
You,
I think I was too caught up in like what Sophia was doing to Johnny. And I don't
mm,
know if that was supposed to be like the red herring, but I was like too
maybe
caught up in the idea. I mean, it's work that you did that, but I feel like I was like, oh, he soaked him in cold water, just like Sophia did. Like he's learned, like, apple
mhm,
doesn't fall far from the tree of, like, Falcone goons
just people
or
being
whatever.
shitty.
Well, that, and also just like methods of torture, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but that was a little bit more surprising for me. But keep going. Great scene.
Yeah, no, a fantastic scene, and I just because I was like, he's got to have a way to turn. Like, he obviously wants to kill both of them, and especially because going into this, we had just seen Maroni get stabbed with the prison guard,
Yeah.
who's an idiot.
Well,
I
yeah.
don't. It's just multiple stabs, bro. You got. Have you never seen a prison movie before,
Also,
dude?
he's fucking giant. I don't know if they
I'm.
cast a smaller prison guard or if uh
It's probably both,
it's
honestly,
just
because he's huge.
huge.
It's probably both, and they also probably definitely shot it in that to
They
emphasize that.
probably put him
But
on an
like,
apple box.
prison guard is stupid as hell for not doing like you got to do the quick stabs, bro. Idiot. idiot. You can't just do one and like leave it there. Bad. He's a bad
This is
bad
really
prison guard.
funny considering our conversation in the break. Uh,
Hey man, you
we
don't need to throw stuff out like
we
that.
laughed too.
Um. Anyway, he was really bad at murdering the inmate. But like because we saw that going in, I was like, oh well, clearly Oz is going to try to take out the whole family in one fell swoop. And then him being soaked, and also Oz wearing the glove at first too, which he like never is wearing gloves. I was like, oh, it's definitely gasoline, and he's going to light them on fire. And he did do exactly that, and burned them both alive, which was pretty gnarly to see.
But
um,
of course, in typical Oz fashion, it blows up right in his face.
Yeah, it does because he, does that while being ambushed also, which like of course is going to happen. But him and his goon they get away, but because of the fire extinguishers or the fire suppression system in the warehouse goes off and ruins all of the mushrooms, which I was even thinking before that, like they definitely were ruined already. Like the Mr. Bloom, who, by the way, I don't remember if I mentioned this last week or if I messaged you about it separately, but I did mean to mention that that is a cut. It's a deep cut for one of the villains in Scott Snyder's and Greg Capullo's run.
So, is there a Mr. Bloom in the show? Did I
Yeah,
miss
he's
this?
the yeah. So his last name, they like call him something. I don't remember what his first name was, but his last name was Bloom, or they might have just called him Mr. Bloom. But
That's so
Mr.
funny. 'Cause I literally just bookmarked a tweet the other day about Mr. Bloom, the comic who you're alluding to, because I was like, I
Yeah.
forgot how sick this guy is.
Oh, he's so
Um,
great. One of my favorite like new Batman villains in a while. Super underrated, mostly because he was a Jim Gordon Batman villain primarily whenever that was
mm,
happening, which that's also a crazy thing to like have happened. I'm a big fan.
Separate
Anyways,
story,
I
separate
digress.
podcast.
But yeah, so like Mr. Bloom is definitely like a reference to him, which is pretty cool because Bloom in the comics deals with like drugs that give people superhuman powers. So it's a very different thing, obviously, but like definitely, this world's version of him who's dealing with bringing a new drug to the streets. But anyways, he made a point in that episode that like these mushrooms needed to be like very cared for specifically in like super stringent conditions, and I'm like, there, the back of this truck, it covered up, is definitely not the way to do that. Like they for sure are ruined anyways. But Oz of course doesn't do it any favors by having a fire suppression system spray
Yeah.
all over them, so that ruined 90% of the haul there. So he's able to get rid of Maroni's wife and child, but Sal escapes with his life, and also most of the mushrooms are ruined in the process. So I love that kind of like, victory always comes at a cost thing, which Sophia says directly to Maroni later in the episode, which I think is great. I also loved the like the phone call between Oz and Maroni when like Sal, is alive
Yeah.
and he's like, "You're cooked, bro," and Oz is like, "Oh yeah, call your wife, dude." Like, and also
Burn.
Maroni's priorities are so skewed. He called Oz before he called his wife, like because like that's
That's some
awful.
storytelling stuff we gotta forgive a little bit.
I mean, yeah, but also like, come on, man. Um, but love that exchange where he's like, "All right, dude, see if your wife answers the phone." I'm like, got him. Um, so yeah, all that stuff was really really great. Thought that was cool. I have a couple others, but what are some of your standouts from this episode?
Yeah, I actually, it's funny that that's kind of where you went, because I was really gravitating towards so much of like the Sophia and Johnny VD stuff this episode, which I'm
Nice.
sure you also enjoyed. But like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
great stuff.
definitely where I was at of like seeing how that was going to pay out. Also,
Oh,
Glup Shido
oh
of the
yeah.
week, Glup Shido of the week of the
Yes,
Batman
dude.
universe, dude.
We
What's
got
his name?
police chief.
Bach?
Yeah,
Back?
I think so. Something like that. I'll Google
Google
it.
this
Keep
while I'm
talking.
talking about it.
Yeah, yeah.
We get the police chief back from the Batman, which is awesome. Because I guess the commissioner
Yeah.
died, because the
Chief
commissioner was
Mackenzie Bach is his
Bach.
name.
There's a second Mackenzie. That's bad. That's bad writing, Matt Reeves. They can't
Well,
both be Mackenzie.
his first, I'm pretty sure the other dude's last name is Kinsey, and this guy's first name is
No,
Mackenzie.
I know. I joke. But
Yeah,
seeing
because the other guy
Bach
is.
was super cool.
It was super cool.
Great character actor. Great
So good.
Batman connection.
As soon as I like heard his voice, I was like, "Oh, it's so
It's the
hyped."
guy. So that was awesome. And again, like, we've joked in some of our group chats, or others have come in and have expressed that their disappointment with the way that critics continue to like for, in a way overhype these episodes. Not my opinion. They're pretty
Oh,
spot
same.
on every week when I come in. And so
Yeah.
I had saw some early reviews that had sort of alluded to uh just Kristen Milioti like kind of taking the character of Sophia in like a sort of new direction, most of course due to the writing and direction and like where they want to take the character, but her performance really roping in sort of a new angle of Sophia this episode, which of course we see on full display, which is awesome. Love her taking on the name of her mother, Gigante,
Hmm.
which was just like really cool. I don't know if that has any like comic connections or like
It
anything on
definitely
your end.
does.
I'll let you do the Google machine while
Yeah.
but we knew, obviously we talked about it last week, of like VD was going to survive for a bit of time. The way that they sort of like suddenly and senselessly executed him, I think really speaks to the show understanding what its moments are and what its moments aren't. Like the death of Maroni's wife and son is sort of played out in a like very suspenseful way that that like something bad's about to happen, whereas VD's death is much more sudden and unexpected in a way that you could see the writing on the wall for sure, but like you're just really caught off guard when she does it in that moment. And what a great scene there, and the way that she is interested in starting her own crime family, and the way that she's pulling power, and VD wanted to do it the old fashioned way and being really caught off guard by her new approach.
Hmm.
And yet her knowing her people and her own ability to execute and lead just in the same way that like Carmine saw in her. It's some really interesting writing. It's some really interesting narrative stuff to be able to tie these threads together and to be able to execute on it so well. The idea of them pooling, and grasping at stacks of money just like coated in VD's blood, is just so symbolic and powerful. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about it in the future sort of speculation thing, because I do not trust this like Sophia and Salvatore connection like at all.
Yeah.
Definitely not a team up that I trust either one of those parties,
Oh no.
particularly Sal, frankly. And so that'll be really interesting to see, but just really was drawn again to what she's doing. We talked a little bit about it in the overview, but obviously Julian Rush's reappearance and connection here. I mean, it's just really clear that like he really just wants to sleep with Sophia, and I just like don't know
He
where
even
that's
says it.
gonna go.
Like he straight
I
up
mean, yeah, like
he's
but
upfront about it at least, which like all right, man. That doesn't make you
um,
like less shitty, but I guess that transparency is nice a little bit, I guess.
I
Like
just like don't know what that's going to like where that storyline is going to end, right? Like I really hear you on the red flashing lights thing. Like I think that is such a good
you know
callback and something to address. Here, I'll let you take the floor a little bit here.
no, you know who he reminds me of, even honestly more so than Julian Day, even though the name similarity, he reminds me of Jervis Tetch and the fact that like he's got Mad Hatter.
Okay, cool. I was like, I don't know who that is. For the
And the
audience.
fact that he's got this like obsession with a woman, right? And like has the very like borderline power and homicidal tendencies and like wants to be in control of the situation and like very clearly is like getting off on that and a rush on like being in this kind of
Dr.
vicinity.
Julian Rush.
And yeah, I mean you're not wrong.
Getting a rush off of it.
But like wanting to be a part of that and like take advantage of that, I definitely see some character similarities and traits there. On the Gigante side of things, I did find that she does become Sofia Falcone Gigante in the comics, but that is because of her marrying Rico or Rocco Gigante.
Mm,
Her mother never has a maiden name that we learn about in the
right.
comics.
So they're
She's
just
just
pulling threads together in a way that's really satisfying. I mean,
yeah.
I was really surprised, like in an exciting way for sure, but just really um I liked the sort of bridging of the families, of like understanding like Johnny Vidi's place and all of it, and that he was her mother's cousin, and just the way that these
Hmm.
families are connected. I thought all of that was really interesting. Um
Dude, I
yeah.
also whenever he's talking about all of that and like trying to save his own skin and stuff, I love that he still can't help but be like an asshole about it and blame Sophia for existing as the
Mm.
reason that her mother died, essentially. Like, he's like, "Oh, it'd been so easy for her to leave had it not been for you and your brother." And it's like, all right, dude, like that's a real asshole thing to do. Like, she just essentially like blaming her for the fact that her mother's dead. Like, cool, man. Um, I just it's a good character touch. It's him staying like in line with who he is as a person, even whenever he's trying to be like, I don't know, relating to like build empathy with her. He's like trying to do that, but he still just like can't get out of the full like resentment that he does hold for her. Because he views her as being partly responsible for his cousin's death, even though he's definitely much more directly responsible for that. But anyways, yeah, I think that all of that stuff was really good, though, the way they did that. And like you were saying earlier, the way that his death is handled is a very like um, it's a very stark difference to the way that things were before in the family, and like a full commitment to like this is a new thing going forward. And also the image of him being dead on the table and the blood pooling and the money there, and then everyone just reaching over him and grabbing the money out of the blood is like the most Gotham City thing ever. Like,
Yeah.
that's just
Just
such a
also like
perfect.
when you say it out loud, you're like you just hear the symbolism.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like,
Yeah.
it's I was watching that, I was like, "Oh man, yeah, this is great. This is perfect." So that was really strong. I agree that I think that the temporary alliance between Sophia and Sal is really smart from both of them. And I like that Sophia is really like, one, obviously in control of the like family now, but also like mentally understanding the pieces on the board and being like, I am not going to kill you because that's exactly what Oz wants to happen. And that would
Right.
be dumb for both of us, which is like very astute observation, and like, good, you're thinking the way that you need to be in order to try to win this. And I like that it is also a payoff to like earlier in the episode when she's like, I intend to end this war. And of course, naturally, the thing that you immediately like leap to is like, oh, she's going to take them out. That's how she's going to end it. But like, she has a different way of doing things in mind. And so I think that's really a smart way to go about that. And just really fits with what she's trying to do, and how she's trying to make things work in a new way while still, of course, being the person in charge. So that's just really strong stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of the third story and element I don't think we've talked much about really is like, now we're sort of holed up in Crown Point.
Hmm.
And seeing sort of everybody's backs up against the wall. And I think we'll save some of the like very end with the trolley stuff for the speculation, because I think that that's going to be a really interesting conversation for there. Um, but seeing Vic really come into his own, and we obviously learned that Oz's partner, Eve, is
Hmm.
is not going to come with him. And I thought it was funny. I don't know if you realize this, but I was watching that scene and he threw the vase. And
Yeah,
last
I know.
week
I
you were
was
like,
like,
I don't know
God
why he's
damn
throwing
it.
the vase at his mom's house. And I was like, oh
It's
no,
not his
it's not his
mom's
mom's
house.
house.
Yeah, dude. As soon as it happened,
Um,
I was like, shit.
it was very, the one negative in the column of predictions.
Yeah.
Um, but continuing to understand their dynamic, and I'm sure she'll come back again, and what her relationship for Oz means. I wonder if like by the end of this they're all going to be one big happy family living in this Falcone mansion. Like that's just been such a
I
central set piece of like, you know
yeah. I
where will
definitely
they be?
for sure for like 10 or 15 seconds thought he was gonna kill her though. Like,
Oh god,
whenever it was the
I
shot
mean, I
underneath
get it.
the glass table, and I was
Yeah,
like, oh no, he's realizing that like she's not like, it's not
she
gonna
yeah.
be what he wants, like,
Maybe you
truly.
have the dark heart, Alex.
I was just
uh,
like, oh, and then she was like, I know I just hold you back right now. And I was like, oh, that's possibly the worst thing that you possibly could have said to him. Like,
yeah,
where he could be like, oh, you're right. And then just straight up he'd be like, I can just get this over with right now, which he didn't, which is great. Glad that that didn't happen.
yeah.
But I, for sure, for a couple seconds was very worried for her life. Um, but yeah, and that it is really smart of Vic to go to Crown Point. And he's like, I don't know, you gotta go somewhere that no one's gonna look. And he's like, all right, I know where I can go. And I mean, yeah, very, very smart call on his part. It's also again nice getting to see Crown Point and
Yeah,
the other sides of Gotham, and like see the parts that have been directly impacted and impacted the most by the flood. I liked getting to see the retaining wall kind of like in
sure.
reconstruction, like that being built up again. I think was really nice, and again, just adding that more connective tissue to the Batman. And the show has been fantastic at not beating you over the head with the fact that like this is in the same world as the Batman, but feeling very
So for that pop-up ad at the end of every episode in the credits. I don't know if your Max does that, but every time,
oh, whenever
every
it goes
time
to
the
big,
credits
like it
roll, it
shrinks
goes
it
big, and you're
scroll.
like, "You should watch the Batman." And I'm like, "I
Yeah.
know. Thank you, HBO."
Every time it puts the credits into the small box on the screen and like puts the big Batman thing, and I have to click back to the credits because I'm like, I want to watch the behind the scenes thing that you're gonna put at the end of this. Like, what are you doing? Yeah, I mean, it does do that every time, but no, it does a good job of like
No, you're right.
feeling organically connected to the Batman as opposed to like beating you over the head with stuff. Also, I know we're going to talk more about it in the next segment when we get to the trolley stuff, but like those tunnels are definitely the same tunnels that Bruce is using to get around
Oh,
the city,
totally.
which is awesome.
Well,
Another just
in the promo, we see a mysterious figure on a motorcycle
that's
in a
not
helmet.
Bruce. It's not him.
We'll talk about it in the speculation section.
It's not the same bike, not the same. It's not him.
You don't know.
I do know.
Um, you don't know. But no, I mean that's all really interesting, and I just continue to find myself too like wondering what, like, I mean, we know this, right? Like Oz is creating so many self-inflicted wounds with what he's doing, right? And I just, part of me can't help but like sit there and wonder how much danger he's putting his own mother in
Oh, she's
by
dead for
just like
sure.
involving her. Well, geez, man, I don't know about that. I hope
I
not.
also thought that he was maybe gonna kill her, even though that would be like the wildest
God,
thing.
what is wrong with
I
you?
mean, dude, it's not my fault. Literally, there have been how many interviews with them, and especially the Colin Farrell interview where he was like, "I'd be real surprised if by the end of this like season, anyone finds him like can like him at all based on the stuff
Well,
that he
sure.
does." So I'm
Well,
like,
I'm
all right,
sure he's
well,
gonna betray Vic in some form or
I
fashion.
see. I'm less sure about that one actually. If
Well,
any of the like people close to him are gonna make it out, I feel more confident about Vic making it out.
but what if Vic oversteps because he's feeling hot off the power, and he's
I don't
like,
think
I
that
could
Vic will
usurp
though,
Oz.
because I think that Vic will has too much respect for Oz and recognition for he's going to be like, I want to be anywhere close to the position that I am without Oz. Like I think that he's got too much of that in him.
We'll find out. But all that to
And
just
bringing up
say, like,
Rex again though was nice. Dude
yes.
loved Rex.
um, but all that really to just say, like, he, obviously sent Vic after his mother and then made him move her, and like she obviously needs help, and obviously is dealing with dementia and a bunch of other things that like require some care. But Sophia like doesn't know she's alive. I don't think Sal knows that she's alive. Like there is something to like Oz's paranoia that he wants to protect his mother, that he may be putting her in more danger by like trying to protect her than if he just let her stay put.
Yeah.
And like maybe I'm just giving not trying to give the show too much credit, but maybe there is something to like the line of logic of like they're just gonna find out because like they're after us, and like it's better to you know to
I
know,
feel like
and
he's
whatever. But I don't know.
yeah.
There's just something about the way that Oz continues to kind of step on his own toes that makes me wonder if like this is a bad. I mean, there's a lot of things he's doing that are bad ideas, but like specifically involving his mother in a way that she probably didn't need to be involved, in a way that will probably come back to bite him in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that why doesn't he just put her in a home, dude? Like I know why he doesn't and that he doesn't want to and she would hate
All
that,
right,
but like
because they have a
that
really. I mean, we're probably going to find out in the flashback next week. Hopefully, there's a flashback about what happened to his
I'm
brothers.
also not confident we'll get a flashback to his childhood.
Well, we will find out an explanation about his childhood, whether that's a flashback or he just tells him the story.
Yeah, that's
Also,
true.
this is a silly me question. I thought that Oz told Vic about. Oh, he told Alberto about Rex Calabrese.
Yes.
because I was like, we've heard this story before.
Yeah.
And I was
That's
like,
why he
hasn't
shot
Vic told this story
Alberta.
or heard this story? And then is he just being nice to Oz? And I was like, no, wait, he told us that. Yeah, I just realized it in real time. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut that part out of the podcast. Any other, kind of overall thoughts or specific thoughts before we kind of dive into speculation?
I do not think so. I think that basically covers it. So, with that, we're going to jump into a quick break, and after the break, we're going to speculate on what's next for season 1. We'll be right back.
Hey, Aspect listener, I'm Robbie.
And I'm Alex, enjoying the show here on the Aspect Network.
Then check out Framing the Force.
We are your one-stop shop for all things in a galaxy far, far away. Each week, we discuss everything from the latest news and releases to the hottest topics in the fandom.
Beyond the films and series, we share our thoughts on every corner of the Star Wars universe, from comics to video games to collectibles and everything in between.
Join us every week as we discuss one of the greatest franchises in film history here on the Aspect Network.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Aspect Reacts. Before the break, we discussed some of our favorite moments from tonight's episode of The Penguin, and to cap off this episode, we wanted to discuss what we think is next. Sean, where do you think the show goes from here?
I thought I messed up in the copy for a second. I was like, uh-oh.
Nope, that was all me.
Sorry, pal.
All me.
Yeah, I mean, super interesting stuff there. Like we wanted to save a lot of the conversation about sort of the last 5 minutes of the episode for, I think, this part, Oz's idea to sort of go down into these trolley tunnels and build a new factory and sort of area out of, what was clearly an important part of his childhood with his brothers. And, it looks like from next week's episode, he's really going to be setting up shop, and probably should have rewatched the teaser again because I feel like I'm missing some important details from it. But I do think it was mostly just built around setting up shop and, maybe finding out some more backstory about him and his brothers. And obviously the audience or the HBO wants you to think that Bruce Wayne's showing up next week as the Drifter, or whatever his nickname
0%
is.
chance. The Drifter is correct, but there's no way that's Bruce.
I mean, you're right, and reviewers have confirmed it as such, but that's not as hooky for the podcast. So thank you for ruining the immersion. But no, it's not Bruce. You actually can see a shot. I noticed it in the trailer. There's a shot of like a wide shot of them in the tunnel where like you can see whoever pulled up on the bike, like just pulling away into the background in a way that like I already can see exactly how this sequence is going to go. But you're super right about like clearly the same tunnels that like Bruce has been using, which I think is super cool and like a pretty cool poetic element. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's a great parallel.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. We talked a little bit about it earlier this episode, but you're sort of off the train on a flashback to Oz's childhood ?
Yeah, I don't really think that we're gonna get that. I don't think that we necessarily need it. I don't know. I also just feel like it would be weird to. I don't want to see young Oz. Like I don't.
It's like young.
I think. Yeah, I think even though I feel like it is sort of hinted at that like maybe it's possibly his fault that his brothers met whatever fate they did, and that he has internalized blaming the city for that as opposed to taking any responsibility that he might have for it. So like if that is the case, obviously the flashback would not then serve to humanize him. That would be like, oh, you're just not great anyways. But I don't know. I still feel like seeing him as a kid will inherently kind of sort of draw more empathy towards him, and I don't think that we need that. And also it would just be so weird to see little kid Oz like running around. I don't know. I'm so used to adult Oz, and I can't imagine that. And also, I don't know. This is another thing that I think is super impressive and hit me like towards the end of this episode, where like it's still just unbelievable to me that is Colin Farrell. Like I can't see him there at all. Like I look and I'm like, I know I'm looking for him, and I know you're in there, but you can't. That's not Colin Farrell.
No,
that's
it's not impressive.
Like,
yeah, I mean it's a good point. I also, part of me though, like on the counter of that, it just feels like the writing is on the wall, and also like the story needs that explanation and has been building towards it, whether it be a flashback or just another one of Oz's stories that he tells aloud to Vic,
Hmm.
or more than likely, I feel like his mother will tell to Vic in some form or fashion as well.
Yeah.
Um, Also, like for what it's worth, like I mean, he's got a lot of scarring on his face, and like it'd be really interesting to see if like whatever happened to his brothers is directly tied to that, in a way that like
That's a
he
good
wears
point.
that mark, and some like I just the show feels like it needs, or not needs, but it feels like it's just a layup to be able to like go in and sort of plug and play and explain some things that um ultimately like would just add so much more context and like really make your eyes go wide and like rethink how you've approached this whole show so far. um
Hmm.
Whether it's needed or not is a separate thing, but I
Yeah.
do think that
I
like it's
definitely
there and I would love to
I
see it.
I do agree with you on that point that it is very possible, bordering on likely. Um, I
Yeah.
just don't. I'm not. I'm not as convinced. But yeah, I think that that's something that we could definitely see. The next episode, from what we can see in the trailer, is definitely, as you were saying, like him establishing his foothold in the new base of operations, reaching out to some of the other like gang leaders and getting them on board. So it'll be like kind of
Oh,
Oz
right,
doing
that's the
that,
part I was missing. Yeah.
and like getting all of the other anyone that's not a former Falcone, now Gigante and Maroni's, like anyone that's not those two, it seems will be joining Team Oz, um, and kind of then leading into what we can maybe assume is an all-out, gang war between those two factions going into episode 7 and 8. Um, so that'll be super interesting. I do also think one thing on the idea of them like having, I love, this is such a good and just cool Gotham thing, but like the fact that Vic is like, oh, how long have these tunnels like been here? And I was like, well, they were abandoned by the time I was a kid. And like that's just, I it's such a Gotham thing to have these layers of the city stacked on top of each other that are just so old and forgotten and like part of the history of the city.
So much like New York.
Yeah, and like it's just great. Like it reminded me a lot of the like Wonder City stuff in Arkham City, where like there's this entire city below the surface and like that kind of thing. And also that, and also got me thinking about the Court of Owls because presumably they're underneath. I love that it's just become a like almost taken as fact that like that the Court of Owls exist in this universe. Like even though
Yeah.
there's no actual confirmation about that, but pretty much everyone feels, myself
God,
included,
I hope
very
he doesn't feel pressured to do it
I
if he
don't
doesn't want to.
I don't think that he feels pressured to do it, but like I feel like it fit, and I think this is the reason that everyone just kind of like assumes like it just fits so perfectly with everything that he's doing. Like it feels like it checks all of the boxes of the things in Gotham that he's, or in Batman, that he's super interested in. He being Matt Reeves. And so yeah, I mean like I of course was like thinking about them where I'm like, oh, they're like even further down than this and like involved more. Not that I think we would see any semblance of a reference to them or anything like that in this show, but like the idea of there being just layers and layers underneath Gotham, and more history there than that, more history that the city has forgotten, I think is a very in character for the city thing.
Yeah.
And so getting to see stuff like that explored, I think was awesome.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And then, we are sort of pushing towards the last few episodes here.
So
Feel like
sad.
we it's time to start speculating about kind of some ending things. We talked a lot about how, you still feel pretty strongly about Oz coming out on top, and I also now feel pretty strongly. I think I'm on that train for sure.
I told you.
Um, do you think though, so this kind of popped into my head while we were recording, like is the last shot of him in the 44 below, like back in that lounge, like on top of the world, like things rolling, or is it like him somewhere else? Like what is our ending shot, that really like showcases that the Penguin is, in power now? Feels like it's got to be in the 44 below, but I
Yeah,
don't know.
I feel like that would be the most fitting, and like him in there as it's being like, getting ready for grand reopening or whatever, like that kind of thing, like him around as there's like people doing their jobs as dictated by Oz. Um, and him kind of like that. I mean, I can see that because I don't, because like that is the Iceberg Lounge, right? Like we've been
Yeah.
like that's what's been established in the world, and so I don't think that we'll see it take shape in a different form, really. And I think it would be the ultimate, you know, power move for him to come in and take over the thing that was, you know, held by the Falcons and their
Yeah.
seat of power and being able to sit there. Um, so yeah, I do think it probably is that, and I do feel very confident in him being able to totally seize control by the end of this season. I don't think we get a season 2. Um,
Yeah, it doesn't feel that way. But like, and the other thing too that I think is interesting to talk about is like, I don't know. I feel less confident in like Bliss all of a sudden. Like the drug, like it just they've got so little left, and Oz is super panicked about it, and like
I
there's
mean,
been
they
a
were
lot
like
of
kind of
discussion this far in the show about like whoever controls the drug trade controls the city, and I think we'll have a lot better answers about that now that it seems like Oz has an answer in the trolley system. So maybe
mhm.
I'm overthinking it, but like part of me is wondering, like, will this continue to be a thing that's like on the streets, or will he have to pivot again? But I think probably the trolley underground cave is probably just, um,
Gonna solve that.
yeah, it just solves the problem already.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they seem to have trays and trays of it in next week from the
Oh,
little
you're right. It's a great
teaser
point.
that we saw. So I think it'll be a thing where they just have a smaller starting point now, but they'll get that and use that to leverage and presumably retake some drops operations too, um, which I have to imagine will just never go away in
Yeah.
this
Well, I loved
universe.
it. I don't know if you caught it, but I love the billboard that was like "Stop the drops" or "Stop drops." Then you pan
Yeah, there's
down,
been
and
a
they're like, "They're gonna stop the drops. Don't worry."
there's been a couple of those billboards throughout um, the show, which those and then the like Bella Real, the real change
Yeah.
billboards are also always nice to see. Just again, like gently reminding you of the universe that this is taking place in, which I think is really great. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, besides him taking power, Sophia probably dying, because like there's
Maybe
no
she
way.
finally gets to go to Italy.
Because like maybe Julian's the one who does that. Because I mean, there's just no way that like she makes it out, right? Like it just
Yeah.
it can't. They can't both be around to have that power. Um,
Maybe she'll go to Bloodhaven.
I was half expecting Oz to tell Vic to take his mom to Bloodhaven. Um,
Oh, that would have been cool. I love a good Bloodhaven reference.
like I really
That's where
thought,
Selena's at right now, right?
yeah. Well,
Sick.
that was the like one option that she listed of possible places for her to go. So
Right.
yeah, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, Sal's not making it out of this season. Sophia can't, I don't think. So
Yeah.
like them both being offed. Um, but besides that, I don't know. I don't know the
So
specifics though.
yeah, and then last, I guess, but not least, like rip to the purple Maserati. That
Yeah.
we lost a good soldier today.
Hmm.
Do we feel like there's a chance he takes on another purple Maserati, or even better, the purple suit? Do we get like the purple suit up by the end of this show?
I can see that. Yeah, I don't think he gets another purple Maserati. I think if he gets another car, it's a gold one.
Oh,
It's gonna go full Rex Calabrese on these people. But
yeah, pretty
um,
good.
yeah, I can see the purple suit. The like actually.
He's earned his comic accurate costume.
Well, I mean, his suit isn't even purple a lot of the time. It'll be like the black with purple accents.
Sure,
'Cause the
you get what I'm
purple's
saying. You get what I'm getting at.
yeah. No, I know what you mean though. Yeah. Um,
Cool.
yeah, I can see that.
Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I don't know how they've done it. I mean, I do know how they've done it. They're all very talented creators, but like the fact that it's just been like 5 straight, like just absolute bangers.
And I don't think it's gonna slow down.
No, I don't either, which is wild. I think it'll just get better, which unbelievable.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to the Aspect Reacts the Penguin. Alex, where can people find you online?
You can find me online at the Alex Batts. It's BATTS on both Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. And please be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect on YouTube and any platform where podcasts are found. Follow us on Twitter/X, Instagram, and TikTok at The Aspect Co. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.